with the three sources of scientific evidence that proves that we now have overwhelming evidence of the need to transition the global economy within prosperity, within planetary boundaries. The first one is that the human pressures on the planet has now reached a crisis point. The era where we can continue with economic growth without putting the stability of the planet at risk has come to an end. Welcome to the Anthropocene. The second is that these pressures on the planet are now at risk of causing irreversible, potentially catastrophic tipping points that would irreversibly drift away from the life support we depend on. And the third is that we are now understanding, for the first time with scientific evidence, that our world economy depends on the extraordinary stability of the Holocene. We leave the last ice age 18,000 years ago and enter what you see here, this extraordinarily stable 12,000 year, which is a 14 degrees Celsius global mean surface temperature with a maximum variability. Can you imagine? A plus minus 0.5 degrees Celsius, which gives us the corridor of life that is the basis for all our life support. And then we come to the start of the Industrial Revolution and look at that kickoff point. We push ourselves outside of the corridor of life. We have in the next 3 to 5 years a trajectory of breaching 1.5 degrees Celsius of global mean surface temperature rise, and we're heading towards a disastrous, unmanageable, in terms of scientific evidence, 3 degrees Celsius world in the next 75 years. This exponential rise originates from multiple exponential hockey sticks. To the left, you see the socioeconomic pressures from GDP growth to material use. On the right-hand side, the impacts on the Earth system. These are the hockey sticks of carbon dioxide, biodiversity loss, degradation. I won't count them. You can pick any parameter that matters for human well-being and the global economy. They look the same. Up until the mid-1950s, we have incremental linear impacts, unsustainable pressures indeed, but on an infinitely large Earth system. And then off we go in the moment of the great acceleration in the mid of the 1950s, and we're now at the ceiling of these hockey sticks, hitting the ceiling of biophysical, hardwired processes that regulates the very functioning and stability of the system. And unfortunately, dear friends, we're still following a dangerous path. 2025 data, which you see here, carbon dioxide, methane emissions, nitrogen oxide continue rising. Ice mass, sea level rise continue rising. Actually, temperatures are increasing faster than we had expected. We see an acceleration even of warming. The Earth's energy imbalance, which should be stable, is rising. That is the heat that is in the pipeline, even if we turned off the economy today. This pushes us closer to tipping points. Tipping points are biophysical large systems that in a healthy state can cool the planet by being dominated by dampening feedbacks. Push them across thresholds and they will change feedbacks and self-amplify warming and undermine the basis for stable economies. We've mapped those big climate tipping point systems. Here you have them. 16 systems across the entire planet that regulates the stability of the climate system. 6 of them are in the Arctic, the Greenland ice sheet with 7 meters sea level rise stored in the ice mass, the AMOC, the overturning of heat in the North Atlantic, the Amazon rainforest, the richest biome on terrestrial ecosystems on land, 3 of them down in Antarctica, and of course also the tropical coral reef systems. They are across the entire planet. These are the systems we depend on. 6 of them are likely to cross their tipping points if we permanently exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius. So this, dear friends, is what adds up scientifically to the heuristic equation you see on the screen. Welcome to the Anthropocene. We're now in the driving seat, the dominating force of change on planet Earth. We now know that the Holocene is the planet we depend on for our civilizations. We've been around on planet Earth for 250,000 years. We've lived like hunters and gatherers, a few million people in caves during ice ages, but our economy, our world, can only thrive in a Holocene reference point as a desired planet, and tipping points are hardwired. Push the systems too far, and we will irreversibly drift away. That is why we need to define a safe operating space for the world economy on a stable planet, and science can now do it. We've been, for the past 20 years, mapping the Earth system processes, which you see to the left here, that regulates the stability of the Earth system. We've been defining control variables with Earth observation data and analytics for all of these 13 control variables, uncertainty ranges, and quantified, for the first time, safe boundaries, go beyond them, and we risk causing these irreversible changes. Now, here you have them. It gives us a safe operating space. That's what you have here in green. It's the climate system, it's biodiversity, it's land system change, it's the bloodstream of the whole Earth system, the hydrological cycle. It is the nitrogen phosphorus cycles of eutrophication. It's stable ocean, it's aerosol loading, it's chemicals, and of course, the stratospheric ozone layer. 9 systems. If we're stewards of them, we have a good chance of prosperity and equity for humanity on planet Earth. What you see here is the planet of Adam Smith. This is the wealth of nations. This is the basis for economic growth as we understand it. It was essentially a very forgiving planet. We could go on quite unsustainably without having invoices being sent back to the economy. Here you have the 1950s, the takeoff point of the Great Acceleration. Already then, we had actually agriculture that was destroying biodiversity, and we were loading chemicals. You all remember Rachel Carson and Silent Spring. This is the moment of Robert Solow. This is the neoclassic economic growth model that we still operate under still today. But look at what's happened. 1960, we're still operating very large in a safe operating space. 1970s, 1980, and then we have the big takeoff point. We breached the climate boundary in 1988. Bang! We have overloading of nutrients and dead zones in the ocean from nitrogen phosphorus loading, which reaches point of a critical stage. And it just continues. 2020s, 2010s, 2020, 23, and finally, we are at a point of the scientific most recent update where we conclude in 2023 that 6 of the 9 boundaries were breached, and that is what you see on this slide. And finally, we have now ramped up and updated the science every year, and this is the 2024 Planetary Health Check, and here you have the 2025 most recent update. So we are ourselves in science also providing you with a state-of-the-art diagnostic at a much higher frequency. What you see here is a dire message to humanity. 7 of the 9 boundaries are outside of the safe operating space. It's not only a climate crisis, we're doing a double mistake. We're loading the Earth system with unsustainable levels of heat, and at the same time undermining the resilience of the living biosphere, the ocean and the biosphere that can dampen this stress. This is the situation we're in. When we integrate all these 9, we come to the following conclusion. We are outside of the safe operating space. We have a real challenge on our watch, but we are in the yellow danger zone, which is the scientific uncertainty range. We're not yet fully in the red zone, where we are very likely to cause a planetary scale drift away from stability. What does this imply? Well, one is it's urgent, but 2, it's not too late. The resilience of the planet, biogeochemically, is still dominated by dampening feedbacks. Despite all unsustainable pressures, she's still standing. She's wobbling, but still standing. Now, this is proven in the following slide. Look at this data. This is the Global Carbon Project on the global carbon cycle, which is an attribute of essentially all the biosphere boundaries and our fossil fuel burning. Above the 0 line is fossil fuel burning and deforestation. That's the pressure we're putting, loading heat into the system. Under the 0 line, you see in blue the carbon uptake in the ocean, in green the carbon uptake on land from intact nature, a phenomenal increase of uptake when we continue stressing the system. It's only that gray sliver you see there, which is the net amount of carbon which remains in the atmosphere, causing the 1.5 soon degrees Celsius of warming. So far, the crisis we're talking about. But look at the graph. Despite the stress, a healthy planet has been very forgiving and dampening this stress. The problem is, you can actually see it, I think, if you look at this graph, that the green line is starting to flatten out. We're having very worrying signs that the carbon uptake in the land-based biosphere is going down. The resilience of the planet is under jeopardy, and this is what we now understand. Secondly, we may be underestimating the tipping point risks. And here's just one example. This is the richest biome on land on planet Earth, the Amazon rainforest. Climate science has been communicating for many years that the risk of tipping this system into a degraded bush savanna, which we know can happen, will not happen until we reach 3 to 5 degrees Celsius of warming, meaning low risk. But when you bring in the breaching of the boundaries of water, biodiversity, deforestation, combining it with climate, the assessment today is that already when we reach 1.5 degrees Celsius, combined with losing over 25% of the canopy cover, we are very likely to cross the tipping point. Professor Carlos Nobre, Brazil's leading Amazon rainforest scientist, is in public statements very clear, we're very close to a tipping point in the Amazon rainforest. So there we are. And this is the safe operating space that we're trying to define scientifically. We're pushing ourselves to the edge. We are still in a Holocene basin. We are at risk of now sliding away in an irreversible journey towards a hothouse Earth if we cross tipping points leading to self-amplified warming from permafrost and the 1,000 petagrams of carbon in the Amazon basin. If we would cross tipping points, our task is to transition towards prosperity and equity within a Holocene-like state. That is the scientific charge. That is what we're arguing is needed to be able to be successful into the future. Because sitting in the edge is already costing the economy. We have the data now. The latest synthesis on climate change impacts on the economy, which you see here, show that already at 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius, we are at risk of having a 5% on average loss of income in the global economy. We're talking trillions, not billions, if we continue the journey we're on. And just look at the curves if we continue beyond 3 degrees Celsius of warming. So in conclusion, before I hand over to the panel, we are at this really, really decisive juncture. Time is running out, but it's not too late. Technology, innovation, getting the economics right on a transition. We know that the solutions are there. We know that solutions across all sectors can give better outcomes for security, for equity, for prosperity, but we need to unload a new paradigm of prosperity within planetary boundaries. In my view, that's what science is clear in messaging to stakeholders around the world. And with that, I thank you so much for this primer from science, and I'd now like to invite my dear colleague and friend André Hoffmann to take the stage as moderator for the panel following up on this priming. Thank you very much.
So, thank you very much, Johan, for this absolutely appropriate setting for our panel. As you can see, the situation is not just something that could be dangerous, it's something that is dangerous, and we need to sort of look at what sort of remedy we can bring to this situation. The theme of our panel is how can we build prosperity within planetary boundaries, and you've seen that out of the 9 planetary boundaries, we've already crossed 7. So action is required, and it's not just a question of doing no harm, it's also a question of regenerating. And I think that's going to be a theme for the outstanding panel we've been able to constitute here. We have really some outstanding individuals whose life evolve around what is happening here, and they represent different sides of the same argument. We have a government minister, we have a CEO of a large company, we have experimenters in energy transitions. So we're going to have a really, I hope, fascinating conversation. Let me call them out one after the other. On my left, we have Alicia Bárcena Ibarra. She's the Secretary of Environment and Natural Resources of Mexico. Thank you for coming, Alicia.
Thank you.
Next to you, Alicia, we have Ramon Laguarta, who is the Chairman and Chief Executive of PepsiCo, an international food business. Thank you very much. Well done. Next to Ramon, we have Andrew Forrest, who is the Executive Chairman and founder of Fortescue in Australia. And we have, at the end, Sumant, who is the Sumant Sinha, sorry, who is the Chair and Chief Executive Officer of Renew in India. Now, I want to also underline the fact that Sumant and Andrew are members of the Alliance of CEO for Climate Leaders here in the World Economic Forum, and that Ramon has taken over the co-chairmanship of the CEO for Nature, which is another community we have created. So anyway, the rules of the game. We've been distributed some questions. We've been assigned some themes we want to discuss. I would suggest that we shouldn't satisfy ourselves with that. Just interrupt, just barge in whenever you feel like it. Let's try to keep this lively. So I'm going to ask the first question in an attempt that's not creating too much chaos, but please, after that, do. Yeah, I'll be very grateful if you could. So the first question will go to Alicia, and I would like to ask you, in particular, Mexico, developing many activities, strategies have to be inclusive of all sorts of elements, but in particular, how can you sort of look at sustainable strategic development in a region which is so dependent on natural environment? So if I can ask you to tell us what your solution is, we would love to hear about it.
Solution, that's something different. But thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very glad to be here. First of all, I guess that what just Johan presented to us is something that planetary boundaries are not negotiable. So one of the first things that we are doing in Mexico actually is to make sure that we understand what are the characteristics of our territory and how much we can contribute in the conservation and restoration. I think we are in the age of restoration. You said Holocene, but I would say that we should go into the age of restoration. The earth needs to be restored. So what are we doing in Mexico? Very quickly, we are very much involved in the conservation of 30% of our territory for year 2030. So that's the first thing. What do we have in place and we need to conserve and restore? And we have 99 million hectares of protected areas that are either, we have jungles and we have many types of ecosystems that we need to protect, terrestrial. And we are also going to protect marine ecosystems. So we need to reach the 30% of protected areas in our territory by 2030. That's number one. Number two, we need to make business with nature. We need to make sure that everybody understands that nature can be good business. So we are putting forward solutions based in nature that can be compatible with climate change, with compensation, with carbon initiatives, and we have done a taxonomy of ecosystems. For example, we have mangroves. How much an hectare of a mangrove, a mature hectare of mangrove, how many carbon emissions can it absorb? And so these are the type of things that a taxonomy of that sort can give companies that are trying to compensate their carbon emissions, because at the end of the day, what do we want to do in Mexico is to decarbonize. We need to, all societies need to decarbonize, and there are many ways of doing it. Of course, one is getting rid of fossil fuels, but a country like mine is probably not ready for that yet, although we are committed to do this in the future and become a net zero country, but not yet. So then what we need to do is to see how we compensate solutions based in nature with carbon emissions. And the third thing, and we are doing many other things, but one that I really want to emphasize is circular economy. We are leaving behind the linear economy altogether, and we're going into circular economy. No waste has to be, all the waste can be used as resources, and this is what we're doing. We are putting together 3 industrial parks on circular economy, and we are talking about circularity of tires, for example, circularity of construction debris, of course, of solid wastes, of plastics, and I know that Pepsi Cola is here. Pepsi Cola is joining Mexico with a very successful plant that is called PetStar, which recycles all the plastic bottles, and these are the type of things that we need to recycle. We need to, actually, at the end of my first statement, would like to say that we need to change the paradigm. We need to make a paradigm shift. No more linear economy, no more extractivism, no more deforestation. So these are the no's that we have to go into a new type of economy.
Well, thank you very much, Alicia. I'd like to immediately react to this. The science that Johan is talking about and the evidence of the loss of biodiversity, the evidence of the rise in CO2 and climate change gases, it has been around for a while. It hasn't really changed behaviors. The idea of, let's address the dinosaur in the room. Look at us. We are about 20 people when the thing was completely full not long ago, from Mr. Harry, for Professor Harry. We'll come back to that later. But what I was trying to say is that because we have so many evidence that have not worked, I think the idea of the time in our history where we think we have to call common sense and to count on the cleverness or perhaps even the sense of moral duty of some of our leaders has not been enough. We need to have incentives. We need to have business answers to these problems. And if I may go back to right to the end to Ramon, could we talk about, you've built a business based on nature. You built a business built on decarbonization mainly, but not only. I think it's important here that we also say that decarbonization is an important aspect, but it is not enough. We also need to restore system, ecosystem, and biodiversity. But again, the floor is yours. Come on, tell us how you do it.
Yeah, look, I think the presentation that Johan made was really very worrying, when you see that put out so succinctly and logically. And you start wondering, why is the world not doing enough? Or why is the world not doing more? And of course, we're having this panel, so this is an important topic for all of us. But the unfortunate part is that as a globe or as a population, we're just not doing enough to contribute into this problem or to solve the problem. Now, as far as our company is concerned, look, we started off 15 years ago. My thesis was that climate change in times to come would become a fundamental problem, which it now has. And we decided to basically start adding more and more clean energy capacity. And over the last 15 years, we've got to a point now where we're generating almost 18 gigawatts of clean energy capacity and feeding that into the grid. But we've also started doing manufacturing of solar panels as well. The point really is that we have to find a way to essentially decarbonize our electricity grids as far as possible. And we have to electrify everything. Also as far as possible. And that is something that is happening at a certain pace in some countries, but not enough in many other countries. We also have to electrify user industries, which is also not happening fast enough. And I'm sure Andrew will talk about the hard-to-abate sectors like his. Again, we're not doing enough. So the point is we have spots of good activity happening, but when you put the whole thing together, it's clearly just not enough at this point in time. One of the things we need to do is we need to build grids much more rapidly. And there's just not enough investment happening in the grid. Because if you want to electrify things and decarbonize that electrification, you need to be able to carry those electrons around. And for that, you need wires. And nobody really globally is investing enough on the electric system to carry these electrons across the world. The other thing is we need to invest much more also in things like green molecules so that we can address the hard-to-abate sectors. Even that is, some countries are moving forward. So what is happening really is that there is now a divide coming up between, in some ways, what you might call the fossil fuel-rich countries, the petro-states, as it were, and those that don't have fossil fuels, the electro-states. Those are really going after electrification, and that includes countries like India and China, for example. We don't have fossil fuels, so we don't have a choice but to go down the clean energy path and make sure that we electrify as far as possible. And that is therefore leading to decarbonization. So for us, it's a commercial need as well as a moral imperative to do what we need to do. Emerging market countries are going to be the hardest hit by climate change. And therefore, we have an obligation to do as much as we can. Certain countries, as I said, like India, are leading the pathway in the right direction. And I just wish more countries would follow us down that path. Instead, what we're seeing is the largest economies of the world are actually moving away from this path. So that's really worrying, especially in light of the presentation that Johan made.
Thank you very much. Maybe we can now turn to Ramon. How can a company justify to its shareholder that you have to pay a green premium? I mean, I know it's slightly disconnected of our conversation, but if you have the opportunity to have somebody like you on the panel, this is a question we should ask.
I mean, this is at the center of the debate, clearly, for companies. How do we reframe the problem? This is not about sustainability or profitability. This is about short-term or long-term. I think this is how we need to reframe the debate. So for a company like ours, and you probably know us from the beverage business, but we happen to be even a larger food company, a food company that sources over 50 crops in many countries around the world. So for us, the debate is we clearly are about growth. So growth is our business model, but growth for the long term means that we need to generate this growth without depleting the resources that will give us this future growth. So it's a very simple framing of the problem, but it has to be owned by the board. It has to be owned by, obviously, the CEO and the management team. And then the hard work is how do you make it operational? How do we make it operational in the business? So you have to create very clear strategic framework. In our case, we call it PEP positive, PepsiCo positive, and it has very clear pillars. And then that is landed into the operating plans. It's measured, we have governance, we make it happen. But we see ourselves not only as taking care of our own company, and thank you for what you said about PepsiCo. We are partners of governments, and please see us as agents of change, because we want to be part of an ecosystem, leaders in an ecosystem that needs to change at scale. So we see ourselves as innovators or first movers in new materials and new technologies, and we can afford, given a larger P&L, some cost of experimentation that we need to then, with other companies that are also willing companies to make changes, we have that small cost of experimentation, but then we put it at the availability of the broader system for scaling up. So we do that with materials, we do that with infrastructure. I think we're making progress in certain areas as a system. I think agriculture in particular, we are helping the farmer to change. We need more efforts to help the farmer to change. That's where I think the private sector, but also the public sector can have a big role, whether you're talking about insurance, loans, early revenue creation for different kind of outputs. Those are areas where we can work together. Scaling agriculture will make a big impact. Health of the soil, use of water, fertilizers, everything else. I think we're making good progress on water as well as a community. We're not making so much progress, as you were saying, in circularity. I think that is an area where I would put it at the center of the opportunity, because if we get too much scalable circularity, we can really make an impact on the resources that we use, and that is positive for the system. So we see ourselves as a company that for the long term needs to manage nature and profitability, and that's something we are getting better, but obviously with hiccups and trade-offs internally. We see ourselves as a company that needs to evolve the full ecosystem, and we want to be drivers, not only as catalysts on the private sector, but also working with the public sector in really channeling and having very clear ecosystem transformation. And obviously we want to be part of this community, World Economic Forum, where we think we can make an impact and a scale transformation. This is not about everyone doing the little thing. This is about all of us joining forces and making change at scale. That is very complex. It is a very complex topic, but I think we need leadership, and we need resources, we need accountability, we need discipline, we need everything that takes to make a change at scale.
So, Ramon, thank you very much for this. But it appears to me that there are two ways of bringing about the change you're talking about. One would be to say we are going to let the market, under the leadership of a couple of visionary leaders, transform the way we do the way we manage our sustainable prosperity within planetary boundaries, or we wait for regulations. We wait for people to tell us, well, from now on, you are not allowed to do something that is destructive of the planet. Instinctively, I think the community in Davos in general would prefer to go for the sort of entrepreneurial route, the way which allows you to sort of see that the market fixes that. And I think, Andrew, you have a major contribution to make to that. You've been innovating into this sector for quite a long time. And perhaps you can tell us what drove you to sort of innovate into that approach to bring about a change without waiting for the regulators to do it for us.
Thank you. Can I kick off maybe with just values? And it's to all my fellow leaders here at the World Economic Forum. Values only matter when they're challenged. They don't matter in good times. Everyone can have great values in good times. When times get tough, that's when your values matter. And I just want to remind the leaders here, and more broadly, that there is no scientific dispute that we're facing into the limits of our planet. Even the most selfish political leaders know that there's boundaries to everything. the economy, and to nature. We risk being those business and political leaders who knew of the planet's limits and elected to cross them anyway. That, ladies and gentlemen, we can't afford. You can fool all the people some of the time or some of the people all the time, but when it comes to physics and biological life, it isn't listening. We are crossing those planetary boundaries. Johan, thank you. I have remarked I thought that was one of the best, most concise talks you've given. But I want to rip the rug, the excuse platform out from my fellow business and even political leaders. You might not have understood Johan's discussion. You may never see it. You may not be interested in seeing it. But what you do know is there are boundaries to everything, including your own political terms. We see that at Fortescue. And we have to drive everything through raw economics. And that is what I now want to present. You might not believe in climate change. You might not believe in love. You might not believe in your fellow man. You might not believe in empathy. But you believe in economics. Because you don't believe in economics, you're gone at the next election. You're gone at the next shareholders meeting. You are toasted. And it's economics, ladies and gentlemen, which I want to speak with you about. The tide is turning. Our company burns 1 billion litres of diesel a year. We power trucks which you would not fit on this stage. We power trains which are the heaviest, fastest bulk trains on Earth. We're building out a ship right now to replace our trial ship which has been operating 4 years, which is 330 metres long. Imagine a ship which is 7 Olympic-sized swimming pools long and 1 Olympic-sized swimming pool wide and carries over 250,000 tonnes. That first ship is underway. It's a big commercial ship. It relies on what we know we can now supply: cheaper energy than oil and gas on a 24/7 baseload basis. In the elimination of 1 billion litres, we are being watched by our competitors. We don't mind that. They want to be fast second movers, fine. BHP, Rio Tinto, Vale, I mean, there's huge companies, ruthless in their competitive spirit, but they are not the lowest cost, they are not the most efficient, they do not carry the tagline of being the highest performing company in their country, in their history. But Fortescue does. Fortescue carries that tagline. We are not woke. We are not senseless greenies. We're hard-edged business people with an understanding of the planet. And removing 1 billion litres of diesel from our supply chains, replacing it with simple renewable energy and batteries. We're going up because we're the world's first prototype, large industrial scale prototype, bigger than many medium-sized cities and certainly bigger than many small countries in terms of energy consumption, energy production and pollution. But we're pulling our weight. I'm saying that out loud. Presidents, prime ministers, fellow chief executives, pull your weight. When we prove, and it's only 2 years out now, when we prove that we can save up to $1 billion per year in operating costs through removing over 1 billion litres of diesel from our supply chains, when we not just maintain but grow our competitive position, continue to outperform our peers, then the bell has tolled. In every thinking cabinet room of government, in every thinking boardroom of business, the fact that in 2026 you turned away from renewables energy because the winds of politics blew your values over, please be reminded, the planet doesn't care. Your voters then won't care. 2030 is around the corner. You will be at 1.5 degrees. You will be crossing planetary boundaries. And like in Australia, where we're suffering serious bushfires at the same time as serious floods, at the same time as decimating the reef systems which you all love, the Great Barrier Reef, the largest in the world, Ningaloo Reef on the other side of the continent or out into the middle of the Indian Ocean. We're decimating those reefs. I've dived on them and I've seen the millions of hectares of country in Australia just turn brown. It's happening, ladies and gentlemen, but we can resist it.
Thank you very much for that, Andrew, and I completely agree. Thank you. Let me try to dial up the heat, to turn the thermostat a little bit. We do have a couple of minutes left, and we need to realize one very simple thing. Despite all the evidence we've heard, despite all the initiatives that we are taking individually and collectively, we are not moving the needle. Why? Because the status quo at the moment is incredibly profitable for many people. And if you want to change people's attitude, if you want to change the system, you're going to have to invest into the benefits of system change. Easy to do if you are a traded company, because the shareholder will bear the costs. Much more difficult to do if you are nature, because nature or the planet is not quoted. And therefore, we need to be able to really go across the edge to be able to really make a difference. So I'm going to give you, each one of you, 2 minutes. Tell me what is one single thing that you can really do to move the system.
Well, in my case, I would certainly congratulate the initiatives that we just heard. But at the other end, after hearing Johan, I think we have an urgency to work faster and to have more scale. I guess that scale is not enough. And I think the business here in Davos, this is why I'm here, I'm trying to make sure that I can find companies that can move quicker, fast, to two things. One is energy transition, which I think is the most important thing that the planet needs today, is to move away from fossil fuels and go into renewable energy, and to do it properly and to do it with business cases, to do a business case of renewable energy. And secondly, I think circular economy. I think these are the two messages I really want to leave here to all the audience. No more linear economy, no more plastics over the world. No, I mean, we can do better. We have all the technology to have full circular economy of the plastics of Pepsi Cola, of the plastics of everybody, and energy transition. These are the two things. Now, for energy transition, I think storage is one of the main problems that we have, at least in the developing world, the storage and the grid. How do we modernize these two to make sure that we take advantage of solar, wind, geothermics? But these are the two things I will fully recommend. Energy transition in a full scale, in a big scale, and circular economy.
Thank you very much, Alicia. The forum is publishing some information on circularity and circular economies. Don't hesitate to pick up the reports and read them. There's some very interesting work being done here.
Yeah, I'll say, and obviously there's a lot of things we can do, but I was listening to you, André, and we have examples as well. To me, is how do we take these examples and we make them fast at scale? Like what's preventing your competitors from doing the same? I don't know. Sometimes it's sharing. Sometimes we are too selfish as companies and we keep it to ourselves. We think it's a competitive advantage. I think there are things that we just need to eliminate the competitive nature and put it at the benefit of the whole system, right? So I think we have enough examples. Like I know we have enough examples in agriculture. We have the business case. We know the model. We know how to scale it. It just doesn't happen enough. So how do we cooperate as a group? How do we become less selfish, more kind of team players? And then also with the governments, like we need to trust each other more. We need to, like public, private, or no, I think this is not where, we need to have tension between each other. These are areas where we need to be able to share with you what works and then scale it through Mexico, right? And we know how it works. So I think there is a little bit of selfishness and competitiveness when I think this is not about being competitive. The truth is that we haven't found a way for consumers to prefer our brands because of sustainability. It's not a competitive nature. It's more of let's change the system, let's think for the long term, let's make sure that 20 years from now we have resilient companies that can still produce great products at the service of consumers, profitable to our shareholders, and great for the communities where we operate, which is the big value creation.
So if I can make a parallel with international companies, it's risk management with a payout in the long term. And that's not in the nature of the way we do business these days. But Andrew, I'm sorry, we're running out of time, so I'm trying to speed up.
I'll only be a minute. Just to endorse what you said, and Madam Minister, thank you. I do want to bring this to Mexico. I do want to scale this. It is perfectly simple. The flat line of technology for fossil fuel means that it's going to get more expensive. Any economist, any business person knows that. The technology growth, particularly in batteries, but solar and wind, is near vertical, which means that its operating cost, its capital cost is falling. We apply that with what we didn't have only last year, and that's incredibly reactive artificial intelligence to manage very complex grids. Humans can't do it. A cloud goes over a solar farm, everything changes, but instantaneous intellect like AI can manage these systems well. This is replicable. This can be taken to Pepsi, it can be taken to Mexico. It's fair enough that they might say, well, prove it first. My own chief executive of Energy and Growth in the audience here wants us to prove it first. I just say, you can see the trend now. It's going to be successful. We'll prove it within 2 years, but follow us now and we'll make the technology available to you now.
Next stop, Mexico.
Next stop, Mexico.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you very much. Sumant,
yeah, look,
I have 45 seconds, just so that you know.
Yeah. Thank you. Look, I think that the best solution here is what Andrew alluded to, which is technology. Technology is going to take us in a direction that is going to make eventually clean energy so much cheaper than the alternative that there'll be such a strong commercial reason to implement it that nobody is going to go after fossil fuels any longer. And those people that are investing behind fossil fuels today will essentially have stranded assets and will get left behind. So I think the fundamental factor that I'm meeting so many exciting companies even here that are doing so much interesting and fantastic research and coming up with new technologies, whether it's on green hydrogen, whether it's in storage, whether it's in generating new solar and wind and other, fusion, for example. So there's a lot of exciting stuff that is happening. And I'm pretty convinced in my mind that in the next 5 to 7 years, we'll see totally new technologies coming out in the clean energy space that we cannot anticipate today. And those are the things that I think ultimately, if implemented at scale, which there is no reason for us not to, if they're commercially sensible, there'll be a ton of capital coming in behind it. I think that's going to be the solution. We'll essentially end up blowing, and I hate to say this, but the fossil fuel sort of system out of the water. But it's going to take a little bit of time, but it is going to happen. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much for that. Maybe if I can just finish this part of the panel by a call to action. Yes. I mentioned the dinosaur in the room before. Look at us. We are not enough convinced of the necessity of what's happening. You've heard it from science. You've heard it from our panelists. It is happening. And if you don't do something about it, we are going to be in trouble. Now, why are we so little people in the room? Because they're all somewhere else listening to people who are saying that the future is fossil fuels. It isn't. And I would really like people to go home knowing that. Number one.
Yes. Yes.
Secondly, I really would like to thank most sincerely my panel. You are outstanding, and you've done that very well. And together possible. Collaboration is better than domination, and we will get there onwards. And thank you to the Center for Nature and Climate of the World Economic Forum, who has put together not only this panel, but has done all the work during the year to support this. So thank you very much to everybody. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.